This is Book Public from Texas Public Radio. I'm Yvette Benavides. On today's episode, I talked to author Tod Lending about his novel, The Umbrella Maker's Son. The eponymous character in The Umbrella Maker's Son is Reuben Berkowitz. When the novel opens, he's a 17-year-old working alongside his father and living in Poland with his middle-class Jewish family. He's in love with his sweetheart, Zelda. But it's 1939. Nazis have invaded his country, his city, his neighborhood, his father's business, their home. World War II has arrived at his doorstep. Zelda and her family flee in search of safety. Reuben is bereft. He desperately wants to get to Krakow to find Zelda and reunite with her. And then, over time, readers will see that Reuben is also separated from his family. More than anything, he wants to survive the chaos, tumult, persecution, and violence that he faces at every turn. While this is a historical novel, author Tod Lending offers us stories here, unforgettable ones, with equally unforgettable characters, those in Reuben's family, but also in his neighborhood and beyond. There are relationship stories here. There's a love story. There's adventure and peril and drama. We need to remember this, that in wars, there are human beings who are trying to live and survive, who strive for a sense of normalcy, who withstand all manner of injustices and violence, and just want to find a way through. The characters who have lost so much in their lives still have the courage to dream dreams, to pursue them, realize them, and live their lives with meaning. And there are good people out there too. Reuben encounters good people, even in the midst of war. Tod Lending shows us again and again that there is cruelty and violence in this world, but there's also a good measure of compassion and ways to make peace with that cruelty and violence and make our way to healing and joy. Tod Lending is an Academy Award-nominated and National Emmy-winning producer, director, writer, and cinematographer. The work he's done telling the stories of others in his documentary films, no doubt, primed him to take on a debut novel and excel like a master of the form. This isn't just a story about something that happened a long time ago. This is a story for us here and now, about inspiring characters who faced unimaginable strife, clung to courage and to love, and endured. I spoke to Tod Lending about his novel, The Umbrella Maker's Son. Can you just give us just a short summary of this novel just to set the table for us?
The story really centers on 17-year-old Reuben Berkowitz. He is a Jew in a middle-class family growing up in Krakow at the time of the war. So he's 17 on September 1st, 1939, when the war actually begins in Poland. And he is the son of an umbrella maker. He plans on going into the same business. And the story unfolds on that day. And it follows Reuben and his family through the initial occupation of the Germans. And it really looks closely at the losses that they incur and how those losses unfold during the first 6, 7, 8 months of the occupation, starting with simple things like the loss of a radio, to losing the right to own a property, to own a car, to have a bank account, to be able to vote, to be able to go to school. I mean, one loss after another occurs over the stretch of time, and it really focuses, and this is really the main theme of the book, is loss. And it looks at how the family deals with those losses, specifically how Reuben, who's a storyteller and whose shoes we're walking in, how he experienced those losses. The second part of the book, they try and escape. And the second part of the book, he ends up away, separated from his family. I can't say what happens there. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but he ends up on a farm working for a farmer who has saved him. And the story really kind of goes into their relationship at that point. And then after a year being on the farm, he is forced to leave and escape because the Germans are now entering that area that he's in. And the farmer's wife is very anti-Semitic. He's in real danger of being on the farm. And he decides to go really into the lion's mouth to find his love, Zelda, the young lady who he's engaged to get married to once they're old, once they turn 20. That's their agreement. She has been missing from the start of the story. We meet her briefly in the beginning, but he decides to go back to Krakow, and he goes to the ghetto, which is a very dangerous journey he takes to search for her. And that's the gist of the plot.
It is, and you're absolutely right about loss upon loss upon loss. When I read a short story, not just a novel, just a short story, as you know, the center of a story is loss. That's the human condition, right? That the protagonist encounters a loss, or there's a void, or he's on a search for something, or he might not even know what's missing, and that's the problem. It's about loss. With this novel, one of the many things that's so remarkable to me about it is this kind of historical fiction, but it's also a very intimate story, not like a short story, but it has these beats. There's a family story. There's a story about a son and his father. There's a story about a son and his mother, his siblings. There's a love story. There's friendship stories. How did you manage this within a historical fiction that you can also do what literary fiction does best? That's like the secret to the universe, I guess. Just tell us.
Well, I appreciate your astute observations there. This being my first novel, I have to tell you, that was one of my biggest struggles at the very beginning, having come from making documentary films to now writing a novel, and the difference between the two in terms of storytelling, in terms of perspective. While the stories have similar, you can transfer story structure from film to novels. What you can't do is get in with novels, with film, what you can't do is get into the interior world of your characters in the way that writing can, and novels in particular can, fictional novels. You are free as a writer to go, and actually you're expected to go into the deep emotionality and psychology of your characters. And so I really worked on that quite hard. And in fact, I started, point of view has a huge impact on creating the sense of relationships, the sense of interiority. And so I started out in third person point of view, which is you're telling a story you can tell from multiple, character perspectives. You're the narrator narrating the story. I wasn't getting inside of Reuven enough, the main character, and an editor I was working with suggested I go to what's called close third. I went to close third, where now you're still in third, but you're now focused on one or two particular characters and keeping yourself grounded in their reality. And I did that, and I still wasn't inside of my main character enough. And that's when I decided to go into first person. And so in terms of writing a historical novel, and your question, well, how did you get, into the intimacy? Mm-hmm. Intimacy is the key word that you used. And that is the word actually that I've struggled to get both in my documentary films, but also and mostly in this novel. How do I develop that intimacy? And once you ground yourself really inside of a character, and you're intimate with that character, and as a writer, you are becoming that character in many ways, the relationships you write come from that place. So I think that's what maybe helped give you that sense of real intimacy between all these numerous relationships he has.
Well, I'm thinking about a short video that I watched on YouTube where you're talking about public media and what public media can do. And I was thinking about even your documentary film about Saul and Ruby. And so as you're saying this, yes, I can see how when you let Reuven do the talking, when we get his insights, when we learn about these experiences from him, it is a bit like listening to the subject of one of your documentaries being able to tell their own story. So you're holding the camera or you're wielding the pen, right? So I just see such a beautiful kind of parallel there. And I've really been thinking about this idea of first person today, knowing that I was going to speak to you, because I like what you said in the video about how the story that you are trying to tell can be far more transcendent when you let Saul or Ruby or Reuven do the talking. And granted, you're Reuven in a way, but yeah, I found that so effective. But like this switching from third person, more omniscient, to a close third to a first, that must have happened early on in your process, where you could where the editor could say that to you and you could see it. And I wonder if it was just kind of an exciting thing to be able. Was it a kind of a freeing thing to be able to do that?
It was, yes, it was very exciting. And yeah, it did happen quickly. The first draft was in third, the second draft was in close third, and the third draft went into first. I mean, one of the pluses was because I have a very solid sense of story structure and development and understand how to build, arcs within scenes and build scenes within acts and have turning points and plot points and all that. So most of my work, quite honestly, was on this issue of getting inside of the main character through writing, through language. Wow, is quite different than dealing with images. The abstract and plasticity of language, the abstract quality of language and the plasticity of it is just for someone who comes from, film, where images, yes, it can be interpreted in different ways, but it's much more concrete than words and language. And the amount of word, the palette that you have to describe things is so enormous with language. And again, for a filmmaker, for me, someone who came out of film, this was just mind blowing to me. I was so, and still am. I'm on my next book now. I mean, this is it. I am just completely fallen in love with novel writing. I don't know, quite honestly, if I'll pick up a camera again.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
I may not. This is, yeah, I've got so many novels floating around in my head. It's not even funny. So, yeah, this is my mission at this point in my life. And look, I had spent 38 years making documentaries, and that's a long stretch, and that's 38 years of telling other people's stories and feeling beholden to other people, to the people I'm filming, beholden to their truths, to how they see the world, not me, not projecting my stuff on them. Of course, I shape their stories in the editing room. If I'm shaping the story in just what I think is important, what I think is interesting, and not true to them, then I'm missing it. And I would never, ever, ever want to do that. And the beauty of going to the writing is now you're beholden to your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own creations, your own stories, the truths of your own truths and the truths of the character. Once you develop a character and the complexities of a character, their psychological and emotional complexities, they have truths that, of course, you're the writer, so it's coming from someplace inside of you, but it doesn't feel that way when you're writing them. It feels as though, okay, I mean, there were things I changed that Reuven would say or do, because I would say to myself, no, that's not what Reuven would say or do. You were projecting that. That's false. And so that's been a really fascinating experience for me in terms of the writing. I think maybe I got off topic there. So
Oh no, no, not. But now there's so many things I want to ask you about all this. So the idea of
Okay.
the idea of the complexities. I'm thinking too about what a daunting thing it is to know about umbrella making or to have such a specific setting and describe like a very particular kitchen or day or the color of the light, right? All those are complexities too. Can you talk to me a little bit about the umbrella making, because there is an umbrella maker in your own story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, my great grandfather, Raphael Lending, was an umbrella maker in Warsaw, and I really wish I knew more about him. Unfortunately, my grandpa, who was his son, one of 10 children, and he came over here when he was 14 years old, and he had no, just like hardly any memories of what happened in Warsaw from trauma. It had to be from trauma.
Yeah.
And we're talking not World War II Warsaw, just so your listeners know, we're talking turn of the century. So we're talking, they came over here. So Raphael Lending, my great grandpa, brought his family over here, his wife and 10 children. They arrived in Ellis Island. They arrived there on Christmas Day, 1909, December 25th, 1909.
Hmm.
And what happened, the only thing I do know, well, it could be family lore. It could be absolutely correct. This was the story we were told. Is what happened is the reason they fled, they had to flee Warsaw and flee Poland, was because one day my great grandpa came across a policeman, a Polish policeman who was beating up a Jew. And apparently he got involved in the altercation. He had a dagger in his umbrella. The dagger was attached to the handle and went into the stem. He pulled his dagger out and he stabbed the policeman. And that was the event, apparently, that catalyzed him to make the decision, we have to get out of here. We have to leave. So that's how they came over here. And then as I wrote this story, of course, I took, poetic license. That story is embedded in the novel, and it is a turning point as well for the Berkovitz family. But in terms of the actual umbrella making that you asked about, and researching the details of that, deciding that the umbrella maker shop in the story is going to be one that is these are custom umbrellas, and they specialize in making these beautiful hand-carved handles made out of various types of wood and even bone and ivory. And the master carver of the umbrella shop in the novel, his name is Cone. Mm-hmm. And Cone is one of my favorite characters.
Mine too, I have to say.
Yeah, he's a beautiful old man who he's in his 80s. He is a master carver. He's a kind, gentle, loving soul who is a widower, who lives with his cat Ness, his son has moved away. He's with his wife and his family up in Gdansk, so he doesn't get to see him much. And he is a grandfather figure to Reuven and a close member of the family. And it's characters like him, and there are other characters like that, like Tadeusz, Mr. Malinowski, who's modeled after Tadeusz Pankiewicz, who's a real person who had the only pharmacy in the ghetto. Characters like Mr. Malinowski, like Cohn and others, who represent the kinder side of life and love and that part of life. And Zelda, of course. I mean, these are the antidote. I tried to thread love and resilience as like the other two main themes for me, besides loss. There's loss, and then there's love and resilience. And to me, love is the antidote to loss, and love is the fuel for resilience in the story. So
but there was a real Mr. Malinowski, right?
Yes, that's what I was just saying. Yes, Mr. Malinowski is modeled after a real man whose memoir was a very important source of research for me. And that man's name is Tadeusz Pankiewicz. And he wrote his memoirs called the Krakow Pharmacy. And he was the only pharmacist in the ghetto, Catholic Pole, who risked his life for the Jews. He put his life on the line. He was asked to leave by the Germans when they built the ghetto. They said there are no non-Jews allowed to live in the ghetto. And Tadeusz Pankiewicz somehow convinced them to let him stay. And he was the only pharmacy inside that ghetto providing badly needed medicines for the Jewish people living there. And he helped the Jews in so many ways. I mean, there were times where they couldn't afford medications. He would give them out for free or at a reduced rate. He never left the pharmacy from 41 to 43. He never left because he was afraid the minute he walks out the gate, they won't allow him back in. So he had his assistants come in and out to bring in supplies and to also bring in things like newspapers and magazines, which the Jews in the ghetto were not allowed to have. So they were completely cut off from the outside world. And Tadeusz had these secretly hidden inside his pharmacies so that there were Jews that would come in and read these surreptitiously, read the magazine or the newspapers, and then go back out and then tell other people in the community what was actually happening with the war. And he also had a secret vault beneath his pharmacy where he stored some of the religious artifacts from the destroyed synagogues, some of the Talmuds, and things like that. So amazing, amazing man. And yes, he is represented by Mr. Malinowski in the book, who Reuven has a very close relationship with.
Yeah. Wow, this is an amazing story. Well, what was your research process like? I mean, I feel like you're so inspired by somebody like Malinowski, but did you then create somebody like Cohn? But besides that, I'm just wondering about how much research you have to do, or are you just sort of carrying around these people and these stories?
It's a little of both, I'd say. um, I sat down and just when I started writing, I have to tell you honestly, this story, it was like a dam broke. It just flowed out of me. I was surprised myself. I was like, wow, I don't know what's going on here, but this was stored inside of me, and I can say it absolutely was heavily influenced by the last film I made about the two Jewish Holocaust survivors, Saul and Ruby. The name of that film is Saul and Ruby's Holocaust Survivor Band. And I spent 3 years filming them. Those were the types of documentaries I made. I made what are called longitudinal films. So I followed them for 3 years, get very, very, very close to them, very deep into their lives, remain friends with them to this day. And going to Poland with them it had a very deep impact on me, even unbeknownst to me. I did not know until I started to write what kind of impact going to Poland with these two Holocaust survivors who were going there to play their music and tell their stories, what kind of impact that really had on me. And so I have to tell you, in terms of research, yeah, a lot of the research was done making that film. Again, unbeknownst to me. I mean, I was actually researching this book as I was making this film without knowing it. And yeah, to be able to hear the stories firsthand, to be able to walk through, especially Krakow, because it wasn't destroyed like Warsaw was. Warsaw was leveled by the Germans. So what's left there now, it's all post-war buildings that were constructed, after the war. And Ruby had a hard time even finding where he grew up. Because of how everything had changed, the names of the streets had changed. That's all in Warsaw, whereas in Krakow, which is where Saul was from, and by the way, and Saul has an extraordinary memory. So we would walk down these gray cobblestone streets that were the exact same streets as what were there in 1939, and walk past the same buildings that were there in 1939. And Saul would take us through his neighborhood and recount, this is where I played soccer, this is where I kicked the ball and broke the window of Mr. Schmelzer's apartment, and this is where Mama bought the challah at the bakery, and over here is where Dad got the smoked herring from the fishmonger, and this is where the market was, and on and on and on. And he took us into his building, where he grew up, and up the stairs, and he wept and he cried and told us stories about things that happened inside the building. So I was just absorbing all this, and it really made the entire environment come alive when I started writing, to create that world, the world building that they talk about with writing. It came, I was lucky that I'd been submersed in that world with these two Holocaust survivors. Then in terms of any additional research, I really, because there was such a flow happening to the story, and I just wanted to keep with it, I did not, I would research briefly as I'm writing, and thank God for the internet. I mean, you could only do that in this day and age where you can actually take a moment, jump online, you have to be careful not to fall down the rabbit holes, because you could end up easily spending days, weeks in something you found really fascinating. So I had to keep telling myself, no, just get what you need, just get the descriptions of what the Druskis look like, or what the cars look like, or what kind of bicycles they rode, or what exactly the clothes look like, or I would make a call to Saul and say, hey, did you have a bathroom in your apartment? Did they have hot water running in the apartments at that time? How did you were you heating with coal, or were you heating with a wood burning stove, Saul? How, and so I could ask him, and or go online. And then, like I said, those two specific books, the Krakow Pharmacy and the Krakow Diary, by Julius Feldman, the other one by Tadeusz Pankiewicz, those two were also incredible firsthand sources.
So I'm thinking about this world building. I can see how the idea maybe of the novel or the story of Reuben can take root while you're traveling through Poland with these two men. But then I start to think about, I don't know, something like, Schlondorf's hump on his back, or these kind of idiosyncratic things like Sarah and Basha, the sisters of Reuben, and you sort of assign to Sarah an interest in astronomy, and to Basha an interest in history and journalism. Those kinds of details are what allow us to be submersed, right? These are the things that allow us as readers to just enter the space. And nobody is like flat, one-dimensional. Even if we just sort of see them for a few pages, everybody is so everybody seems like such a rich character. And it stands to reason, because it's Reuben, it's sort of like Reuben's perception. It's Reuben responding, or it's Reuben thinking something about them, even if it's just in passing. So there's such a richness in the storytelling. It is a kind of a world building. It's really something. I mean, it's alchemical. It's it's really something. Pardon my my unbridled gushing here.
You're a deep reader. You are a deep reader. Seriously.
Well, this is a great book. I'm telling you. In case you didn't know, but
yeah, I don't assume anything. I'm a skeptic. If I told one friend, the reviews have been really good.
Oh, I know.
I'm like, when are the bad reviews? Like, I'm a skeptic. It's like, wait a second. When's the hatchet gonna come down here?
I cannot imagine that would. I've read a lot of books in my day. I cannot imagine that that's going to happen. I mean, every little thing, like even the meaning of the name of the cat, Ness. I mean, you didn't just name the cat. It's sort of like we also know what the cat's name means. It's just,
Yeah.
and we don't just know that there's somebody custom making umbrellas, but we know what metals might be used, or what kind of wood, or the ivory, or what kind of animal might be depicted. It, it's
Wow.
just, yeah. Wow,
I
you.
love hearing your description. You should come on the road with me. I'll just have you introduce the film and talk about, I mean, the film, the novel.
The novel, the film, maybe the film, who knows?
The film. Hopefully there will be a film. But
Oh, I can so see it, because there's also something very cinematic, even when we go very small and very intimate, but it's a cinematic. There's a cinematic quality to it, just so you know. But
thank you.
you're welcome.
You are awesome. I no, I was just gonna say, in terms of details, it's an interesting thing as a writer to try and figure out how much is needed and how much is too much. So that's a delicate, when it comes to the world building and everything you just described, when, at what point, how much does the reader need to know about Sarah and Basha? I mean, I had other scenes. You can't imagine how much I edited out, because it was like, okay, this is too, now you're slowing the story down. Now it's too much. It's finding that delicate balance between giving just enough for the reader to feel like you just expressed that, oh, wow, okay, this is an interesting person, even though they have a small role in this. They're still, they're not flat. There's a three-dimensionality to this character.
But part of it is Reuven. I mean, part of it is just because
Yes.
of the way you draw Reuven, and what he sees, we see. What he's about to be completely bereft of, we get. Because we just walked through the house with him, or, realized that we'll never see the mother's furniture again, or whatever it might be. So all of that. But then in part 2, where we get to the farm, this is actually based on something you really experienced. How did you decide to weave that in here?
My subconscious kind of
Yeah.
was responsible for that. When they escaped when they left Krakow, and then he became separated from his family, again, avoiding any spoilers, knowing the farmland, I think also being influenced by the fact that Ruby had been, of Saul and Ruby. Ruby had been picked up by a farmer and hidden on a farm. Saul's wife, Clara, in real life, had been hidden on a farm for, it certainly wasn't something that would be unimaginable. It was very imaginable and very, very true.
Yeah.
In terms of something that could happen. And then in addition to that, I had my own farm experience, which was profound for me. And the farmer I worked for, this is when I was 16, I modeled Stanislav after him in many ways. This is, again, it's a way of, that's the beauty of novel. One of the beautiful things about novel writing is incorporating aspects of your own life into the story, presuming that they fit, that they're appropriate. And in this case, I felt it anchored me in Stanislav's character. Stanislav in the book, the man I worked for, Joe Hershey, was illiterate. Stanislav is illiterate.
Yeah.
He had some serious prejudices against Jews, against blacks, especially blacks. I had never been exposed to such a man, to a completely very racist man. And so I knew what it was like to work for somebody like that, which was, Reuven's situation. I mean, especially in the case of Stanislav, his wife was very, very anti-Semitic. So anyway, I knew what it was like to be around that. And I was around the same age as Reuben. I was 16, Reuben 17 at that point. And it was a profound experience because while the farmer I worked for was racist, was illiterate, he was also one of the smartest men I knew. He knew everything about mechanics, about carpentry, about agriculture. He was a hard worker. And he was the antithesis of my own father, who was a much more gentle man, a man who he was, my own dad was an artist, an illustrator. So not, nothing like the man's man, the classic male role model of a very masculine man, is Joe. And eventually we developed actually kind of a father-son relationship with Joe. And I was able to talk to him about his views, his racist and prejudiced views. And he was able to listen to me because we had developed this trust and respect in each other. And it was quite an experience to go through that. I mean, this is somebody who normally I would have nothing to do with. And in the city, I would have never come across somebody like Joe and had, lived in close quarters with him. So yeah, I had a very good sense of who Stanislav was based on that personal experience I had.
I think I like this idea that you can mine from your real life, or even from what you learned from Saul and Ruby about farms, about working on a farm, or having to hide on a farm, or having to live on a farm. I think of fiction, like your novel, as being able to allow us to tell the truest truths. We have some kind of a facility to do that. So I'm not at all surprised to see the ways that you can bring forth a novel like this based on real things, real people, real inspiration from other people and places to create this novel. And I feel like I've kind of heard from you about that moment when you yourself could discern how freeing it could be to tell a story like this that is so full of verisimilitude, of all of the very real, all too real things, through writing something you've made up. So not anything that you just like ginned up and pulled out of the ether. I mean, obviously there's such verisimilitude here because there's such a realness because of what you're able to mine, but then also what you're able to imagine and sort of merge and marry that way. So I don't know. I just like the reinforcement of this idea of what a novel can do. And I know you started to write this novel through the pandemic, right, and beyond. And here we are in 2025, where we are. You wrote after the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in, what was that, 2022, February, after October 7th, 2023, for example. I mean, through all of that and in the midst of what continues to go on in Gaza and other places in our world. And here we have a story set in 1939, a story about people enduring, as you said, loss upon loss upon loss, such a violent conflict shrouded in persecution and prejudice that portends, even back then, the generational trauma that you mentioned. And here we are almost 90 years later. The world continues to live with war, with catastrophe, and loss upon loss upon loss. And I will tell you that being able to carry this book around lately and be in this world was a balm, was a salve. What do we learn from Reuven Berkowitz, this umbrella maker's son? What do you want people who haven't picked up the book yet, or people who have read the book, about why you are now so moved to write novels and to tell these stories?
Oof. Well, first of all, I appreciate you bringing up the context in which the historical, political, social context in which this book is now being released. I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, but I wanted to mention that, I started writing the book before the Russian invasion, before October 7th. And I saw, if you had asked me what the meaning, what are the meanings of Holocaust stories at this point? And I would have said, it's important to remember, to never forget. These are stories that are very important, I think, for all people to have a better sense of, what happened during that period. Apparently, people under 40 in this country, and this is actually in Europe as well, have the numbers of people that are not educated about the Holocaust are just rising. Right, they're going higher and higher. The percentage of people who are coming up, especially if you go into the rural areas of this country. We tend to focus on just the urban areas. I mean, the numbers that don't even know or understand about the Holocaust. So that's very important. But then Russia happened, and I thought, oh my God, this story is really relevant to now, like not just in terms of educating in terms of the past, but wow, what is happening now? And October 7th, the day of, oh my God, I can't, this book is even more relevant now. Especially for Jews like myself, October 7th was a re-traumatization. It was like it was like stepping back into the Holocaust. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
So then I thought, oh, this is more relevant than I could have ever imagined in terms of this book and Holocaust stories. And then post October 7th happens. Yeah. The aftermath, the war, the killings of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. And I thought, oh my God, now I don't know. Like this is so horrific, this whole thing. Wow. What is the meaning, or what are the meanings, or what is the role or the roles of Holocaust story? It threw me into another loop very personally, and I really had to wrestle with it. And I would say where I've landed at this point is I feel that there's a part of Jew, and I'm not a religious Jew, but in the Jewish religion, there's a mysticism aspect to the religion called Kabbalah. And in Kabbalah, there is a belief in what's called tikkun. And I'm not the best person to be defining exactly what tikkun is, but and certainly I can't go into the details of Kabbalah. I'm not qualified, but I can tell you tikkun is about healing the world, healing the moral injustices. It's about living a life that is very aware, cognizant about human rights, human justice, moral justice, justice in the universe. And so that's one important role that I think Holocaust stories play. I think I want people to walk away with a sense of healing. Tikkun is about healing the world through a heightened awareness of all of these injustices. And by reading a Holocaust story, I would hope that it would sensitize people to not only the suffering of Jews, but the suffering of others, as you mentioned. There's all this suffering, all this loss going on around us. So these Holocaust stories, as far as I'm concerned, are, while they focus on Jewish suffering and Jewish persecution, these are also stories and lessons. You may call them allegorical tales that I think apply to everyone, every person. And the other role is heightening the awareness of dehumanizing. What happens when we dehumanize an entire class of people? this is something that Holocaust survivors will talk about. I mean, this is what led to the Holocaust, a dehumanization of an entire class of people. And as far as I'm concerned, as Jews, this is a lesson for everybody, but especially I feel for the Jewish people like myself, who are highly aware and sensitized about the Holocaust and what it's done to us. We need to also remember and be aware, have our awareness heightened on not repeating the dehumanization of others in any way, shape, or form.
Tod Lending, thank you so much for talking to me today. What a thrill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it.
Tod Lending is the author of The Umbrella Maker's Son. It's published by HarperCollins. You can learn more about Tod Lending at his website. That's todlending.com, TodLending.com. This has been Book Public from Texas Public Radio. Jacob Rosati composed our theme music. Dan Katz is Texas Public Radio's news director. I'm Yvette Benavides.